Wrestling and long-term planning are not always the best of friends. While sometimes plans can be thought out well in advance and carefully plotted down to the smallest details, the truth is that wrestling, given the nature of the industry, is quite often booked with a short-term mindset. Sometimes it feels like shows are written on a napkin and catering 30 minutes before airtime, but there you go. This philosophy extends to everything from storylines and title reigns to gimmicks and tag teams. Considering WWE's noted neglect of their tag teams over the decades, it's hardly shocking that a good number of duos are put together without much an endgame in mind. This inevitably leads to a breakup, and while on occasion that can be the culmination of a long-term build, more often than not it comes out of nowhere, leaving fans and sometimes the performers themselves feeling like the team was broken up way too soon. Of course, it's not always creative's fault, as real-life things like injuries and departures can be the cause. But whatever the reason, we've seen some truly awesome tag teams cease to be just as it looked like they were getting going. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 short-lived WWE tag teams that broke up way too soon. Join us. Number 10, Big Show and The Undertaker. When Paul White arrived in WWE in 1999, he knew he had to make it to the Big Show. I mean, he was the Big Show, but despite a few years of success in WCW, the Giant was far from the finished product and took some time getting used to his new environment. He had been protected by pals like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage in Atlanta, but in the Shark Tank that was WWE during the Attitude Era, Show had a much harder time keeping up with the likes of Stone Cold, The Rock, and The Undertaker. Being a fellow big man, it was Mark Calloway who decided to mentor the expensive acquisition, taking him under his wing not only backstage but also on screen when they formed a sadly short-lived tag team in the summer of '99. They looked like one hell of a formidable unit and captured the WWE Tag Team titles in one of their very first matches together, beating Kane and X-Pac, another good, albeit short-lived team, at SummerSlam. Losing the title a couple of weeks later to the Rock and Sock Connection, hey, there's another one, on SmackDown, the team was quickly split up as Taker took some time off to heal up. The duo was done from then on, and the Phenom and the world's largest athlete were much more likely to be adversaries. Number 9, Eddie Guerrero and Tarjiri. The uncle-nephew team of Eddie and Chavo Guerrero were riding high and gearing up for a big tag team title ladder match against Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin of Team Angle when disaster struck. Chavo injured his bicep during a dark match, putting him out of action for several months. Rather than cancel the contest, WWE drafted in a replacement, pairing the often overlooked Tarjiri with Eddie to form a makeshift tag team. Demonstrating instant chemistry, Latino Heat and the Japanese Buzzsaw won the ladder match and became champs in their first bout together as a team. It was readily apparent that the two complemented each other stylistically, as they never missed a beat in the ring and had a number of outstanding defenses against Charlie and Shelton and others. Sadly, after just 6 weeks of seamless performances, the duo were broken up. Eddie went ballistic after Tarjiri collided with his lowrider, blasting him through the windshield of the car in retaliation. It was no secret that WWE had bigger plans for Guerrero, who had really upped his game during the course of the previous year, but it's still a shame that we didn't get to see much more than around a month and a half of a team that was just so much fun to watch between the ropes. Number 8, Hurricane. Look, sometimes you just have to break up a promising tag team with a ready-built name and instant marketability in order to forge ahead with a storyline based on murder and necrophilia. It happens, and you should probably expect it from a company like WWE, really. When the Hurricane jumped to Raw in September of 2003, he instantly began teaming with Kane. It just made sense. One was big, the other was little. Both wore masks. They both used the chokeslam as a finisher, and they had the name Hurricane just sitting there waiting for them. The would-be superhero and the Big Red Machine could have been a major force in the Red Brand's tag division for a long time, and they certainly got off on the right foot, winning the World Tag Team titles in their very first match together. Then, just a few weeks later, they lost the straps to Christian and Chris Jericho and ceased teaming up. You see, Kane was a little, distracted by the revelations about his personal life at this point, and Helms took it as his cue to go solo. Before long, both men would form new teams, Kane partnering with Rob Van Dam, and Hurricane finding his sidekick in Rosie. Number 7, Hedgies. What does everybody want? Steve Blackman. What does everybody need? Steve Blackman! And I guess Al Snow was alright as well. Both the Lethal Weapon and Mick Foley's favourite punchline were fighting a losing battle for precious airtime when they were teamed together in early 2000. In the storyline, Snow was trying to get Blackman to loosen up, and the two were involved in many amusing skits that played up their odd couple dynamic. Snow was the goofy, zany one, while Blackman was the straight guy who was more likely to deliver a deadly blow with a pair of nunchucks than he was a knock-knock joke. The tandem grew in popularity and even teamed together at WrestleMania 16, albeit in a losing effort to TNA. They also failed in their quest to become tag team champions thanks to those pesky radicals, but it's not championship reigns or classic matches that Hedgies are remembered for. Unfortunately, the team didn't last very long despite getting over, as Blackman turned his attention back to the hardcore title scene and Snow went after European gold. A team for just shy of 6 months, Hedgies managed to stand out at a time that WWE had an embarrassingly strong roster and, if given the opportunity, might have done great stuff with the likes of the Hardys, Dudleys, and Edge and Christian. Number 6, Rated RKO. Sometimes opposites attract, and other times two performers cut from the same cloth make the best teams. Randy Orton and Edge, who formed the impressive Rated RKO in late 2006, were both young, talented, sleazy, and had a chip on their shoulder the size of a really big chip. Like, really big. Flanked by the lovely Lita, the Legend Killer and the Rated R Superstar set their sights on those damn DX boys. In the storyline, Edge and Orton felt as though Triple H and Shawn Michaels were holding them back and preventing them from becoming world champions and fulfilling their potential. And in real life, they were probably... you know what, on second thoughts, let's just leave that one, shall we? Rated RKO were able to do what no other team had been able to do since the Degenerates reunited and handed them their first losses. Following that, they beat Ric Flair and Roddy Piper to claim the tag team titles and continued warring with the Game and HBK. They were smooth as silk in the ring and hilarious during promos and skits, such as when they parodied their enemies, but they had a serious edge to them too. No pun intended. The dispute with DX raged on until early 2007, but ended abruptly when Trips tore his quad. Rated RKO then continued teaming for a few more months before dissension predictably led to their breakup. Number 5, the 1-2-3 Kid and Marty Gianetti. Unlike a team like Big Show and The Undertaker or Rated RKO, the pairing of Marty Gianetti and the 1-2-3 Kid was clearly not a case of two would-be world champions joining forces. Undersized and often underutilized, the Clique member and the former Rocker were teamed up because they certainly didn't have much of a chance of finding prolonged success in the singles ranks. Marty Gianetti is, famously, Marty Gianetti and almost always finds himself in one tag team or another, while Waltman has enjoyed singles success but arguably works better in a tag team or bigger group, like X Factor. Remember them? Too many legends. The exciting neon-soaked High Flyers began their alliance at the tail end of 1993 and were actually the survivors in their Survivor Series tag team elimination match, outlasting the likes of IRS, Adam Bomb, Rick Martel, and Diesel. In January of 94, they shockingly upset the Quebecers on an episode of Raw, winning the tag titles in a nice moment for the underdogs. Not so shockingly, they dropped them back a week later at a Madison Square Garden house show, and after their epic 7-day reign, immediately went their separate ways. Though never outright confirmed, Party Marty disappeared from the company a short while later in order to sort out some legal issues and wouldn't return for a year, which might have had something to do with the abrupt breakup. Number 4, the Allied Powers. If there's one thing us Brits are good at, it's moaning about the weather. If we're good at anything else though, it's war. I mean, just look at our record. Makes me want to jump in a Spitfire and sing God Save the Queen right now, it does. Anyway, we're good at war, and we like to be reminded about it at every opportunity. So naturally, a tag team matching up one of our greatest wrestlers with some American bloke and naming them after the country's alliance during World War II was an instant smash. Partnering the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith with Lex Luger was a natural, since both were big babyface stars and had similar gimmicks emphasizing patriotism. Adorned in the stars and stripes and Union flag, they looked the absolute business as they overpowered opponents and got audiences as pumped up as their inflated physiques. The Allied Powers never won the tag team titles, though they did come close and had several decent matches with champions Yokozuna and Owen Hart, and started to disband after around 6 months of teaming, during which time they mainly battled with members of the $1 Million Corporation. Regrettably, we never got to see the big blow-off match between the partners, as the total package sneakily headed for WCW before it could happen. Number 3, Y2AJ. Good enemies, but seemingly better friends, the tag team of AJ Styles and Chris Jericho was one that was born out of a respectful in-ring rivalry built around competition. Y2J and the Phenomenal One had traded wins on television and pay-per-view in early 2016, and having developed a respect for one another, decided to team up in pursuit of tag team gold. This was right at the start of AJ's WWE run, and it was clear that the company were trying to figure out just what they could do with him. A team with an established WWE veteran like Jericho was as safe a bet as any. Y2AJ beat the Social Outcasts a couple of times and also got the better of the New Day in a non-title match, setting up a bout for the titles the next week. Unfortunately, they lost that one, and so the troubles began. Jericho turned on his partner and then burned their t-shirt, which had been designed on very short notice to trick fans into thinking the team would be a long-term one, in the middle of the ring. That led to a series of matches between the pair, including one at WrestleMania, and that was all fine and dandy of course, but they didn't even come close to scratching the surface of what they could do as a team. Number 2, Rey Mysterio and Edge. It was early days in the initial draft split in 2002, and WWE were doing what they could to create a new batch of brand-exclusive stars. While over on Raw we had the aforementioned Murder and Necrophilia, on SmackDown we had the SmackDown 6, a sextet of incredible performers who were battling over the newly created tag team titles. Joining the familiar Los Guerreros and frenemies Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit were the dynamic duo of Edge and Rey Mysterio, who gelled instantly and engaged in a series of breathtaking matches with the other two teams. The best of which was probably the finals of the tag title tournament, a thriller at no mercy against Angle and Benoit. They ultimately came out second best on that occasion, but won an incredible 2 out of 3 falls match a few weeks later to become champs. Their reign wasn't a long one, mind you, as they dropped the belts to Eddie and Chavo just 10 days later at Survivor Series. The team were only a full unit for a few months, but they packed some amazing bouts into that time. Whenever they teamed up in the future for one-off matches, they proved that they hadn't lost any of their shared chemistry. Number 1, the 2-man power trip. Who doesn't love a good power trip? I know I do, which is why I made all of the Cultaholic staff sing me happy birthday every day for a month one time. Sometimes you just have to show everyone who the boss really is, you know? And that's exactly what Steve Austin and Triple H did when they formed, on paper one of the most powerful and decorated tag teams of all time. It came about in the aftermath of WrestleMania 17 and Stone Cold turning heel and aligning himself with Mr. McMahon. Where the CEO is, the cerebral assassin is never very far behind, and despite the fact that the two had been trying to kill each other just a couple of months prior, they put their differences aside to create the 2-man power trip. At one point in possession of the WWE Intercontinental and Tag Team titles, they were for a brief time unstoppable, and had a series of memorable matches with the Hardys, the Brothers of Destruction, and Chris's Benoit and Jericho. Alas, it was during a barn burner with Y2J and the Rabid Wolverine that Triple H suffered his first quad tear, necessitating a breakup while he was booked in for surgery. They had dropped the titles in that match anyway, and likely would have turned on each other before long. When the game had recovered, the Power Trip, now both babyfaces, had a one-night reunion, going up against Kurt Angle and Booker T, and serving as a reminder of what a tremendous unit they had been during their short lifespan.